In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I made these photographs of Luke Skywalker and Eddie Van Halen using the Canon R6 Mark II and its focus bracketing feature. Hello, how you doing? It's Phil Thatch, and today I'm finally getting around to making a focus bracketing video properly on a tripod with a small subject. And I'm using, this is my product photography studio that I made a while back. I'll put a link to the video showing how I made this little product photography studio at the end of this video. But I've done macro focus bracketing, mostly with my R7, not with my R6 II yet. With no tripod, not the way you're supposed to do it, but it was kind of fun to experiment with that. And I've done a lot of focus bracketing for landscape photography, but this is the first time I've done focus bracketing for small subjects, not really macro, although I am using the macro lens on a tripod the way it's actually supposed to be done, instead of, you know, trying to hand hold while this thing makes 10 or 15 or 20 shots and not move and have my living subject not move. This is a static subject, a static camera, the way it's supposed to be done. Okay, so let's go into the menus and figure out how to turn focus bracketing on. I'm going to hit the menu button, and one of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the red menu, page 9 on the R6 Mark II, and go down to shooting info display. This is something that I learned from my friend Tim Childress, and we'll go down to lens info display, and we're going to turn the focus distance display to always. I think it defaults to in manual focus mode, but I do think it's helpful, and I was thankful to learn this from Tim. You can see the display across the bottom of the lens, and as you adjust the focus, you can see that it shows you the distance to your subject. And also, while you're doing your focus stacking and your focus bracketing, you can see the focus move. So thanks to Tim Childers for teaching me that, and he did a video similar to this, and I'm going to put a link to that video at the end of this video. To turn focus bracketing on, you go to the red menu, page 6, as shown on the screen here. It defaults to disabled, and if you turn the camera off and back on, it disables it. I've got my number of shots set to 30, but you kind of experiment around and see how many you need, because what happens when you do a focus bracket, you set your focus point to the closest part of your subject. You focus there, and when you make your shot, the first shot focuses right there, and then it focuses slightly further and further away until it either reaches the end of the number of shots you have programmed or infinity, whichever comes first. And when I do landscape photography, I want it to go all the way to infinity. But doing shots in the product photography studio here, I don't want it to go all the way to infinity, because the maximum distance of my subject is only a foot or two away, a couple of feet away. I have my number of shots set at 30, which is probably a little bit more than I need, but it's okay to do too many. Next up is focus increment, which, as you can see, the default is 4, but I like to use 1 because you're using the electronic shutter anytime you're doing focus bracketing, so there's no wear and tear on the camera, and the more shots you have, the more likely the camera is going to be able to stack them properly. So I always use 1, at least when I'm doing work on a tripod. When I was doing macro subjects handheld and the subject's moving, I wanted to have that increment a little bit more because I wanted it to do less shots so the whole process could get done quicker before either me or the subject moved. But this is different. On a tripod with a non-moving subject, I use focus increment 1, and you can experiment and see what you like. Next is exposure smoothing. Sometimes as the focus changes, the exposure will change a little bit, and the exposure smoothing kind of blends them to where the exposure is all the same. Next up is depth composite. This, if you disable this, it'll make all your shots for you, but it won't combine them together and stack them. So you want to enable depth composite. And crop depth composite, that's if you have a lot of focus breathing with your lens, and sometimes there's extra area that's hanging off from some of the pictures that don't match up with others, and it'll crop that off. So I have all 3 of those things enabled. I set my number of shots for this situation to 30, and what you really kind of need to do is trial and error and see how many shots you need. If you still have some of your subject that's out of focus towards the back end, then you don't have enough shots. And if it keeps making shots way past the very back of your subject is in focus and it's trying to focus on things that it doesn't need to be focusing on, then you can reduce your number of shots. But for this situation, I'm at 30, and focus increment, like I say, on a tripod, I like to have it at 1. Okay, so my first shot at this is going to be a photograph of my Luke Skywalker Funko Pop, which is a cool little device. And I've just noticed that it is a bobblehead and its head is wiggling, so that is problematic at best. But I'm going to have to give it some time to quit shaking before I make my shot. I've got my aperture at f4, and you could even do this at 2.8 if you're using a focus increment of 1, but I figure the lens is probably its sharpest at f4 or maybe 5.6, so I'm doing it at f4. And now that I've stood still for a while, it does appear to have stopped shaking. So I've got my focus point set on the Star Wars logo at the bottom of the Funko Pop. And you know what, I think that may not be the best place. I think maybe the closest thing is this front part of his helmet. So let me set it right there and focus. And then I'm on a timer. I'm on a 2-second timer. I've got my exposure dialed in. I've done a few of these, so I've kind of got this figured out. I got my exposure dialed in about overexposed according to the meter, about 1/3 of a stop, and I have very limited blinkies at that point. And I'll press my shutter button, 2-second timer, and you can see the focus is moving on the dial. Now it's making the composite. It's combining those 30 shots it just made. And let's see, here is the final product. Let me hit the play button. And as you can see, that is a JPEG that is nice and sharp front to back because it stacked all 30 of those images. And you can see up at the top left of the screen, you can see we've done 31 shots to make that. So there's 30 RAWs, and it combined all those together and made the 31st shot, which is this JPEG of Luke Skywalker. So now that I've kind of got that figured out, how to make this shot, my whole point of this thing, there's an Eddie Van Halen Funko Pop, which, you know, Eddie Van Halen's my favorite guitarist, and it's really cool. He's dressed like he was on the 1984 tour, and he's got his Kramer 5150 guitar, which is awesome. And Heather got it for me. I can't remember if she got it for me for Christmas or Valentine's or what it was, but she got it for me, and she even bought a box to put it in. But we're going to get Eddie out, and we're going to make a photograph of him. Not that I don't think Luke Skywalker is awesome, but I really want to make a shot of my Eddie Van Halen Funko Pop. Okay, I've got Eddie Van Halen out of the box, and I've got him positioned here. I think the closest part of him is the hair on his forehead. So I've got my focus point set right there, and let's shoot. Making the composite. This is awesome. All right, let's see what it turned out to look like. There we go. First shot of the Eddie Van Halen Funko Pop. Looks like it is perfectly in focus front to back, and I'm pretty happy with that. I edited those two photos just a little bit in Lightroom to get the color to pop just a little bit more and things like that, and I really am happy with the way they turned out. And of course, you know, you don't have to do Funko Pops with this. This could be any kind of product photography, could be jewelry, or just all sorts of things you can do with that focus bracketing technique in a small cardboard box product photography studio. If you have an R7 or an R6 Mark II, try focus bracketing. It's a really cool feature of this camera. All right, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Give me a thumbs up if you like the content. Make sure I'm going to put a link to Tim Childers' video about this subject at the end of this video, so make sure and go over there and check that out. Have a great day. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell. Bye-bye.